Hello guys, I've been wanting to do this tutorial for a very long time and here it is finally. Today we'll be talking about the C programming language from scratch. This is going to be a very wonderful tutorial where we'll walk you through all the basic and even intermediate concepts in the C programming language. We are going to talk about a lot of things like why C programming is awesome. And then we are going to go into how we can install our text editor and our compiler for the C programming language. We are going to start writing codes and basically all the topics that you have to know, all the basic topics in C, we are going to look at each one of them. Topics like variables, data types, comments, escape sequence, format specifiers, constants, arithmetic operators. We're going to be looking at all these things. Memory address, those are intermediate topics. We're also going to consider that. We're going to look at loops, if statements, return statements, functions in C, arrays, getting user inputs, returning the inputs, constants, working with numbers, printf, and basically everything you need to know to understand the basics of C. At the end of this tutorial series, you should be able to understand the basics of the C programming language. You should be able to understand how to pen down your thought process, or in other words, you should be able to know how to write down pseudocodes for your C tasks, especially as we go into the more complicated ones. You should be able to solve the basic and even intermediate C tasks. And you should have everything you need to go further and learn more advanced topics in the C programming language. So I'm really excited to do this once again with you, right from B-Wave ICT. And as always, if you do enjoy these videos, please leave a like and subscribe. So let's get started now. And first off, we'll see why C programming language is awesome. The C programming language is usually referred to as a middle level language. It was originally developed by Dennis Ritchie between 1969 and 1973. And the main aim of the C programming language, a system programming language to write an operating system like Windows, Mac, those are operating systems. And that was the original idea behind the C programming language. Now, the main features of the C programming language include low-level access to memory, and basically it allows you to come closer to your hardware, closer to your computer systems. Now, when we say C programming language is a middle-level language, what do we mean by that? It simply means that the C programming language is somewhere between the high-level language and the low-level languages. Now, let me explain that. Low-level language are language that are so conversant with the computer. The machine can understand it, but humans can hardly ever understand it. For example, look at what I have here. And if you're asked to ever try to interpret any of these things, they look so difficult to interpret. This is an example of a low-level language. And so the C programming language, it's not as difficult as this because it's not really a low-level programming language. Now, it's not also a high-level programming language because a high-level programming language was made to actually be more readable to humans. For example, look at this. Now, this program here simply prints out hello world. And this program here also prints out hello world. So everything from here to here prints out hello world. And then here just prints out hello world. But if you read this now, you can see it's clear. You understand what it's printing. You can read it so easily. Even if you've never written any line of code, you can read this. This is a high-level programming language. designed to suit man's need better, designed so that you can understand it better. Now, this is a low-level programming language. It's designed so that the computer can understand it, but it's not really friendly to man. And C falls in between the low-level language and the high-level language. So it's not as difficult to understand as the low-level programming languages, but it's not as easy and friendly to write as the high-level programming language. And C falls in between the two. You may want to tell yourself, why not I just learn the high-level programming language and leave C, which is a middle-level programming language? But there is a very, very big need for us to learn the C programming language. C programming language can be used to help you understand the fundamentals of computer theories. And for someone who is looking to be a software engineer, you really want to know how the software operates. The C programming language is the perfect language for you to learn how the software, how the computer operates. Now, the C programming language helps you prepare your mind to think. You have to think deep, think hard, try to figure out solutions to problems, and that's what the C programming language is designed to do. So the C programming language is really, really, really an important programming language. Now that you've known why C programming language is awesome, I'm going to share with you now some of the benefits you'll get if you learn the C programming language. The first benefit is that the programmer will make more money. And then the next benefit is that your lunch will not be important. And then you will be able to eat one child a egg per day. One child a egg per day. Every day and night, you would be able to eat this kind of foods. One child a egg per day. All right, so there are basically two things we need if we want to write C codes. We'll need a text editor, which is a place where we write our C codes. That's the first thing we'll need. And then the second thing we'll be needing is a compiler. So after writing our C codes, we'll need something to compile it, to interpret it, and give us the outputs. So basically, we'll need these two things, a text editor and then a compiler. We would be using an IDE to write our C codes since it's designed to help us write codes. You'll find it much more easier and efficient in writing codes than using other regular normal text editors. So for this tutorial, we are going to download an IDE called CodeBlocks. I'll walk you through the process as we'll download it together. If you're using Windows, you can just follow along. Now you come to your browser here and simply search for CodeBlocks. And once you hit enter, you're going to see this page. This is the CodeBlocks website. Here you can see downloads. So you just want to click on downloads here and then download the binary release. So this is the easiest way for us to download CodeBlocks. Click on download the binary release, then scroll down and you can see if you're using Microsoft Windows, then these are applicable to you. And if you're using Linux, then this is applicable to you. And if you're using Mac OS, then this is applicable to you. I'm using Windows, so let's go ahead and download for Windows. Now you can see many download links here, but the one we are going to be downloading is this one. This is the one we are going to be downloading. if we download this, we are going to be also able to download a compiler along with it. So we don't have to download another special compiler after downloading these code blocks here. So since we are going to need two things, and this download link here, this download option provides us with the two things we need, basically the code blocks IDE and a compiler. That's the one we are going to be using. Now you can download from sourceforge.net. Just click it and your download should start shortly. So if you look down now, it's downloading already. So all you have to do is wait for it to finish downloading. All right, once the download is done, you want to click here, click on open, and it's going to open code blocks now. So what you want to do is install it. So you just click on run, and let's go through the installation process now, and click on next. I agree. Leave these configurations the way they are. Just click on next. Could leave these things the way they are. Click on install and allow it to finish installing. After installation, you should see a question here. Do you want to run code blocks now? Yes, we want to run code blocks now. So we click yes, and it's going to open now. Then we can go ahead and run it. And it's completed. So click on next, finish. And here we can see what we have here. It says our current default compiler, GNU GCC compiler. Now this GNU GCC compiler is the compiler for the C programming language, and that's the compiler we are going to be using. It's a very, very popular compiler. I'm sure you must have heard about it before. And so it's detected. You remember we downloaded these code blocks main GW version because it has a compiler with it. So we click on the compiler here and click OK. And should open code blocks for us now. And it says code blocks is not the default application for our C and C++. Well, we want to make it the default application for us writing our C files. So we'll click yes, associate code block with C, C++ file types, and we'll click on OK. Now we've downloaded and installed code blocks, and next thing we want to do is to create a new project with code blocks. So come here, click on create a new project, and there are different kinds of projects, but the projects we want to make it a console application. And so after clicking on the console application, come here, click go. And all right, we want to skip this page next time and just press next. Now, the language we want to use is the C, not C++. So change the C++ to C and click on next. Now, what's the title of the project we want to create? So the title would be C programming. You can name it anything, and the folder to create this project in would be, so let's see the folders we have. I will just click on desktop here and all folders, or I could click on anywhere basically and click on next here. All of these, we just go on and click on finish. So you see our compiler, GNU GCC compiler, and we'll click on finish. So that's all. Now you want to come here and click on this button that says sources. Just click on it, and click on here that says main.c. Now, when you open here, by default, you have some codes waiting for you here. And this shows that you've successfully installed your code blocks and it's ready for you to use it. Now, to confirm that our code blocks is ready, come here to this green button. Let's see if this is going to run anything. Basically, come here to this green button, the one that says build and run, and click on it. Let's see what happens. And we can see on our terminal, we have hello world being printed out here. So it's run. All right. So what we've just done is to download and install code blocks. Now it's time to start talking about the C programming language from the scratch. And what's better way to start than to explain this default text we had? Remember, we didn't type any of these things out, but we saw it. So let's just talk about what happened. We have about 8 lines of code here that we did not attach to. We didn't write it at all. It came default as we opened our sources and then our main.c file. And that's totally okay. Now, remember I said an IDE is designed to help us write codes. And this code blocks IDE was designed to help us write this code, C codes. And so its default code it gave us were this. It came with the editor. When you download and install the editor, it comes default with it. But now let's go ahead and explain what each of these lines are doing. You know, when we click on this run here, we eventually got the output that says hello world. And so these 8 lines gave us hello world. But the first line here is we have the include with a hashtag here, and we have StdioH. So what is StdioH? It is a header file which has the necessary information to include the input and output related functions into our program. So this is what we're saying. This header file helps us define this printf. So something like printf, or we have scanf, and some other functions are defined by our header files. So with this header file, the C programming language now knows what this printf means, and it's able to do this. So by default, we use this header file that is already there for us to define some built-in functions that we always use in our code, like this one. So if you want to use something like printf or scanf in your code, you have to include the header file. Otherwise, it's going to throw a warning for us. Now, this is another header file that has to do with the standard library. We probably don't need for now, so I could remove that and still run my code. And it's not going to give me any warning. It's still going to give me the exact same input I need. So although code blocks has a default here, we can do without it for now, basically. Now let's go talk about why we did put this include. You know, I just explained the StdioH, but why did we put include? So include is something called a preprocessor. When you say include, it gives the file in between these angle brackets here. It's going to now add anything you put in between these angle brackets in your code. So to include this code here, this hashtag include will add anything in between here to our code, and this is very helpful to us. Now let's go to the next line. So we've gone ahead to explain this. Now let's go to this one. So why do we have int main? Now, the main function is the starting point of program. So you may have seen something like this before. This you may have seen something like main entry points. Now, if you see something like this, that's totally correct, because the main is the entry point or the starting point of our program execution. So when our program wants to run, it's going to execute from main. And so we start our program by saying int main. Now, this is a default value, and we generally would start our program using this. Let's go ahead and talk about why we include this. Now, before we talk about this, you may be wondering why ints. What's an int here? So int means integer, and this integer value main, this code here, just represents the status of our program, and C understands it as the entry point of our program and the starting points. And so we just invoke it by doing int main. Now, why do we have these curly braces here? C is what we call a block structured programming language. And a block structured programming language is where statements are grouped together to achieve specific tasks using curly braces. What does that mean? In our C code here, we group statements together using curly braces. That means everything inside these curly braces is grouped together as one task that helps us achieve one aim. Okay, so anything I write in here, if I go on and keep writing things, because of these curly braces here and here, it's going to say everything inside here, it would group them together, and it's going to help me achieve one aim. So without these curly braces, for example, let's come down now and write printf, and inside we write hello, and we come down here and put a semicolon. Now, when we enter, you see that it gets us to this line here. But when we use this printf here, you can see they are all grouped together and are indented properly. So you can, and that's because of our curly braces here. So that's that about that. Now let's talk about this next line, printf, and then inside the printf we have hello world. So what is a printf? Printf, as I've explained before, it's a function that is defined in our StdioH header. And what does this function do? It simply would print out everything in between this quotation mark. In between this double quotation mark, printf will print everything inside. So something like hello world, for example, were printed out completely. Now that's because of the printf. Now if we just write print and try to run this program, you would see it's giving us a red line here. So it doesn't understand print, but when we use printf, it understands that, and it's going to print out everything in here. Now you understand why I said printf is defined here, and it will print out everything inside. Now let's talk about the return value, which is the next line. Why are we returning 0? When we declare the main function here as an integer, the operating system would expect an integer value, and later we are going to be talking more about integers, but the operating system would expect that as we call this program, we should return an integer value. And the integer value we return for the main function, if everything works perfectly, is 0. So you should always return 0 for your main function. If all your codes work perfectly, your code should return 0 along with whatever you've given it to print out. So that's why when we hit the build and run, you can see our process returns 0. Everything works the way we wanted it to work. And that's why we're returning 0. This semicolon here represents the end of the statement. So at the end of each statement, we end it with a semicolon. This is one statement and we end it with a semicolon. This is another statement, we end it with a semicolon. And then this end curly braces too. Remember we said that when you put the starting curly braces, it's going to group everything inside as one. And so when you want that grouping to be over, you pretty much stop by closing the curly braces. And so C is going to understand everything. Now you understand these default codes that we've written. And from here now, we can start talking about various concepts from the scratch up until the advanced. All right. So there's something I want you to know. And anytime you're dealing with a programming language, see yourself as the master. What a programming language does, anyone precisely, is help you talk through the computer. So as you're dealing with this C programming language, see it as a tool that helps you talk to your computers. And how does that happen? So let's say, what do you want to tell this your computer to do for you now? Just think. In its lowest 10. Okay, so let's say we want our computer to draw a shape for us. And what shape can we draw? Let's say to print the letter L on the screen. How do you get to do that? So let's do that first. I just want to use this example to show you what you can do with C or any programming language, how you should see it. Many people are very cautious. They don't want to avoid they want to avoid every mistake. No, you don't learn like that. And have fun with the program, have fun with the application. So let's say we want to print L on the screen in form of shape. So we can now draw letter L. So I'll come here now. I'm going to put another printf and keep drawing my L shape. So I can copy this now and come down, paste it, and come down. So depends on how long I want my L shape to be. I'll continue to paste it, and here I can now do something like this. And don't forget your semicolon to show the end of a statement. So I can do this, and now let's see what it will print. But before we do that, something we're missing. So forgot to add a new line character, and let's go ahead and add that now. So letter L, let's see what it would actually print out for us. I'm going to run this, and you can see what it prints out here. You can see the shape L, and if it's not so clear, let me give paste to it. So let me rerun this code. Now you can see it's letter L, and I could come up here. I want to make the L very bold. I want to make you see the L very well. So could add a new line character, then space it even more. and go ahead and print it out now. Okay, semicolon. So now you can see the shape here, and the L shape as it displays on the keyboard. Now we can turn this L to E and do that. Come here, and this time add the print statements. And in the middle here too, we can have another print statement. And let's try this out. Okay, I forgot semicolons. So it's one thing you want to remember, the syntax, semicolon, very important. And now you see we have a letter E. So basically we've just used our C programming language to print out letter E. So how about this? Try to print out your name, okay, like B-Wave, Daniel, Progress. Try to print out your name using the terminal, using C programming language. Print out your names, all the characters of your name here. And all of them should appear on this line. Try to see if you can do that. It's nothing, it's just a simple project, but the aim is to get you used to the C programming language. So you could just try that out. Now, if you notice what I did here, you can see that I'm adding a /n here, and I've not really explained what that does. And you can also see that I gave a lot of spaces here and spaces in between. So I'm going to explain that. Now let's talk about the /n first. The /n adds a new line character. So this n adds a new line character. That is, after printing out, so I'm going to remove all of this and print out something different time to explain the new line character to you. So let's say B-Wave, I want to print out B-Wave, and I want to print out hello. If I print out this, they would appear in the same line. Let's print it out. You can see on our terminal we have B-Wave and hello here. However, if I come down and put a new line character, so after the B-Wave, I put a /n and then hello. Now let's see what this does. You can see we have B-Wave in one line and hello in the next line here. So that's what a /n does. It breaks the line. It gives us a new line. So when you hear /n, it's a new line character. Now let's go back to that letter E I printed out and see what the new line did for us. So if I remove, now let me print this out again. You can see the E shape here. Let me remove the first new line character. So I'll just uncomment that out now. With this and close it out. So now let me print it out with a new line. So you can see it actually went up a little bit. And now if I remove the new lines from here, let's see if we still have our shape. So let's go ahead and print it out. And now you can see our shape is scattered. So you saw what the new line helped us do. For each of the shape we printed out, the new line helped us return to the next line. So that's actually quite important. In different tags, you may see things like print out new line character. So now you know the usefulness of new lines in C. All right, so now we've done shapes. We've just printed out random things. I'm sure on your own, you must have tried out printing out your name using these shapes. If you did that, very fine. So if you remember when we did this, when we were looking at this concept, I did do something like this. And I haven't explained what this is. So this is one very important factor in very important topic in C and in all programming language, and it is comments. What is a comment? A comment is a description that you don't want the computer to read, a code that you don't want the to compile. Just call that a comment. So if I want to say I am just writing some things and I don't want the computer to compile this, I would have to do something so that these comments, so that this thing here will not be interpreted as code. For example, if I try to compile my program now, you can see the red line I have here, and this is not going to compile. However, so for me to make this program to work without deleting this thing, I have to do what we call comments. So I'm going to put my / here and try to run this code again. And you can see now, okay, and printf. So you can see the program now ran successfully. I did not delete this code, but the two / here has ensured that, I have this code here, but then the program doesn't read it. So this is called a comment. Now, why is comment important? You use comment to give description, or in programming generally, to give description of your code, to explain something, a line, just describe it. So if you're used to a coding style called Betty, you know that Betty always looks for your comments. And in Betty, you cannot use the / because most times you want to write many lines of comments. For example, in Betty, you would write main as the entry points, and you want to come down to write the return value. And so you come down and you write return, and is equal to 0. And now if you notice what happened, you can see that our main entry point is in gray, but our return 0 is not. If we try to compile this program, we would have an issue. Our code is reading the return statement on line 5. And so this option of commenting out only works when you want to comment a single line like I just did. Any other thing after that, it's not going to comment it out. To avoid this issue, you use a slash here and an asterisk. When you do this, every other thing down has been commented out, so the program will not read any other thing. So if you want to use multi-line comments, that is first line, second line, third line, you want to comment out a lot of things, you have to use the / and asterisk here. Then you close it out by doing the same. Now this is going to close out the comment. So everything in between here and here is going to be commented out. So now you know how to write your comments. If you're working with Betty coding style, you know how to write your comments. Come down and you put the description, main, entry, points, and you go down and you put the return value equal to 0, and then you comment out your code, and every other thing will work fine. So guys, the next thing we want to talk about is what is called escape sequence in C. So what is an escape sequence in C? An escape sequence is a sequence of a character which has indirect meaning when it is placed within double quotes. It means there are special characters that put them in between these quotes here. They don't serve the meaning you see it literally have. For example, see the example of an escape sequence here. This slash n new line. You know, when we run this program, you would think that C should print everything in between it, and then this n should be printed out. But when you run your program, you will not see the n. So this slash n here is an escape sequence because it has an indirect meaning in between the quotes. Now, some of these escape sequence are very, very important, and we'll be talking about the most useful one. Now, the most common one is this slash n, which stands for a new line. But there are other useful ones. For example, if you wanted to print this word here, programming is like building a multilingual puzzle. How would you print it out? All right, let's go ahead and you will show me how you will print this out. You know, if you copy this way and come here, and you come here and paste it, paste that, and try to run the code, and let's see what happens. Now it gives us an error. You know why? Because it doesn't understand this. It's not going to print this out as a character. But if we remove this now and try to run it, you see everything runs successfully. So what just happened? It doesn't understand why we are printing two quotes here. And so these quotes, remember what we wanted to print out has these quotes. In one of your recent tasks, you may have seen it. Taking some quiz questions or some kind of project, you may have seen this to print out something like this. So you can see that when you use you can see now that when you use these double quotes here and you use them to each other, it has a different meaning from when you use them like this. So how can we go ahead to print out this thing without having challenge of getting an error? Well, we use our escape character. So when we want to print out a new line, we use this escape character here after our first quote. So after this quote, we put the escape, this slash here, and gives us access and to everything here. So it's going to print in everything, including this double quote again. So this is a very useful escape sequence. So let's go and check it out now. And you can see we have our programming. It's like in a multilingual puzzle with the double quotes in it. So that's how to pretty much use this escape character. Now you see the usefulness of this. There are quite a lot of them. Assuming we wanted to print hello world, with the word being in quotes. So how do you print out something like this? So if you want to print out a word with single quotes like this, all you have to do for the word, you come here and put in your forward slash, your slash characters here, backward slash that is. And when you do this and then you print out whatever you want to print, Now you put the characters in between here, sorry. You put the characters like this way, and then you can print out what it prints. And then you can see hello world is here. So that's also an escape character. This is an escape character in C. There are quite a couple of other useful ones. For example, if you want to print out say multiple quotes, two multiple quotes again, how do you do that? Now let's copy this and go back to our code blocks. And assuming we want to print this out, and let's try to print this out and see what it tells us. So it gives us a red line here, and that is because it doesn't recognize these two quotes. So how do we fix that error? We simply use our escape character here, and we come in here and paste it. So we use our two backward slash as our escape characters here. Then when we run this code, we can see we have hello and the word is returned to us in double quotes. So these are the basic escape characters you want to know. Now, let's say we want to print out something like this. It's going to have a backslash. How are you going to print out this? Let's copy it and try to print it out the normal way and see if that's going to work. And so you can see it's printed out, but it didn't print what we expected to print. So we are supposed to print out this backslash here, but it did not print that. It's only printed hello world. So how can you solve this issue? Well, we use the backslash character twice. And once we put it twice like this, it's going to know that the second one is going to show. Our escape backslash is going to make sure that the second backslash shows. So let's go ahead and run this program now. You can see we have our backslash here, hello world, exactly what we print. So that's it for some of the useful escape sequences in C. Let's go to our next topic now, still on the basics. Over now to what we call data types in C programming language. All right, so there are a lot of data types in C, but for this tutorial, we'll be looking at the major types, the major data types in C. And one of those major data types is an int. So an int is a major data type. You can see it here. So what is an int? An integer, or an int for short, stores an integer value. That is a whole number. Could be positive or negative. So could have -5, could have -1, -4, or it could be positive values like 0, 6, 8. But one thing is clear about it, all integer takes are whole numbers. So integer equal to number in C. And the size of an integer in C is 4 bytes. So an integer takes up 4 bytes. That is, if I store an integer now, say int a equal to 10, it's going to assign 4 bytes to this integer value a that stores 10 as its size. Another major data type in C is called a float. So what is a float? A float stores a floating point number. It's almost self-explanatory. It stores a number that has a point in it. So 45.9, that is a float. could have minus 2.56, that's a float. We could have 1.411, that's a float. In any case, a float stores a decimal point. So float stores a decimal point, and the size of a float is actually 4 bytes. So 4 bytes. That is, if I assign a float and give it 1.73, this is going to assign 4 bytes of space to my float A, which has the value of 1.74. Another data type we want to talk about is the double. So what is a double? A double is essentially the same thing as a float, but it takes more bigger space to store larger numbers. So we can store very large numbers in double as it takes a larger space compared to float. So this is what we are saying. We could store numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.343454. You know, this is a large number and you can store them in a double. You could also store numbers that have minus a negative value, 3, 4, and just store them in a double. So you can see these are large numbers and we use a double to store them. So how many bytes does a double take? It takes 8 bytes. A double basically takes 8 bytes and then a float takes 4 bytes. So now you understand why a double can store larger numbers more than it. Another data type we'll be looking at is the character or the char data type. The char data type is used to store a single number like A, B, C, D. You know, all these single numbers are stored in a data type called char or char. So it simply means character for short. And a char or char data type essentially takes 1 byte. Takes 1 byte of computer space, computer memory, just 1 byte. So those are the basic data types. Let me write them again for clarity's sake. So they are ints, then we have floats, and we have double, and we have char. Another one we have is void. This void is an incomplete data type. It's mainly used in functions, and we'll discuss about functions in later tutorial. But for now, all you have to know is that a void is an incomplete data type. It's used in functions and it takes just one byte. You may have already started working with void. For example, our main could print void here. And so this is an incomplete data type. We could also say something like void fun. So what it means is that this function is not going to return anything. This fun function is not going to return anything. That's what void means. We'll talk more about functions later tutorials. All right, now let's talk about variables. Now we've talked about data types. One great something that could help us use our data types is variables. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Now, talking about variables, a lot of times when we work with C, we are dealing with data. So as we continue to progress, we'll deal with more and more data types in C, more data rather in C. And this data, we have to store them inside in a place. Where would we store this data in? We could say we'll store them in a container. Like when you buy something and you just have to store it in a safe place where insects or children do not cannot enter or access. You store it inside a container and probably keep it in a safe place. The same way too, in C, we have to store our data in a safe place where we can always refer back to it whenever we need it. And that safe place is variable. So variables help us to store data in C. And then whenever we want to access this data, we just call it by the variable name. So there are two ways. Variable usually requires two things. One is the declaration and one is the initialization of variables. Now, so how do we declare variables? We declare it by naming the variables. So how can we go ahead to name our variables? We can do something like age. Now, this is a variable. But now a variable also needs us to tell us what kind of data we are storing in it. So we cannot just write age in a variable because C does not know what age is. So we have to tell C that this variable is of the data type int. So we can say something like int age. And so now we've declared our variable. We go ahead to initialize it by giving it a value it should hold. So this int age can hold a value of 20. So what this simply means is that this is a variable called age of type int, and it has the value 20. So wherever C sees age, it's going to assume age is of the type int, as you can see here, and age stores 20. So this is how to declare and initialize a variable. Now, there are some general laws regarding variables, and one of those laws is that our variables should start with a letter or an underscore. So we could do something like age, int, age, and this is allowed. Now we can also have something like int age. Now this starts with a letter, this starts with an underscore, but we cannot have something like int age. You cannot have something like this. As you can see it clearly, it's even not highlighting the same way like the rest. So this is invalid in C. Now we cannot have some kind of special characters in a variable like asterisk. So this is not allowed. And we cannot have something like plus age as our variable. So that is not allowed to be a variable name. Now variables are case sensitive. And this means that if I come here and I do int age and I initialize it to 20, now these are two different variables, and the reason is this as an uppercase and this as a lowercase. So you want to take note of that. Now variables can also be constructed with digits. For example, you could do age 1, this is valid, or age 2, or age 3, and that is valid. Now variables are not only of type ints. You could go ahead to have different kind of variables called character, grade, and store it to be, right? So these are also variables. Now there are some names that we can't use as a variable. For example, we cannot name our variable int. Now this is totally unacceptable because these are special keywords in C. So those are reserved words. Cannot name our variable like that. But generally, This way, we name our variable. So we can go ahead and store a lot of variable and give them different values. And that's totally fine. So I want to go ahead and tell you about two things now before we solve our first problem in C. And one of that I want to tell you, since we've been dealing with the printf function and we've been basically using it to print out text on the screen, things like hello world and all of that. But you can also use another function to print out text on the screen that works very identically to printf, and that is the puts function. So I just wanted to introduce you to that puts function. So how does the puts function work? Let's try that now, and let's use the the printf function first so we can understand how the puts function works. And I'm going to run this code now. We have hello world here printed out on our screens, which is very, very good. Here in our puts function, we come and let's also print out hello world. So you still have hello world printed out, but let me try to increase my text font so you see it better. So let me run this again. Now you see hello world clearly written on the screen. The same thing we got in our printf function. But now let's do something with printf. So printf hello world, and then I wanted to print another line of code that says hello world again, like this. Now let's try to run this code and see what it prints out. So you can see hello world and hello world here. No new line. And I guess you know why, because we did not use the new line character. But now let's use puts in the functions and see what happens. So when we use the puts function and we have an automatic new line without using the /n. Now this is the biggest difference between the printf function and the puts function. One automatically gives it a new line while the other does not. But the printf is more popular because it can handle different of other functions, including format specifiers, and is generally more used than the puts function. But in a situation where you are not allowed or you decide to use the puts function, it could also be very, very useful. Now, after telling you about the puts function, which helps us to also print messages to the screen, now let's talk a little about size of operator in C. The size of operator can be used to do different things in C. But for now, we'll just stick with one to use size of operator to get the data type. When we say size of, what are we saying? Size of simply goes with this syntax here that says, this is the syntax to get the size of. This is a size of operator. As the name implies, it simply means it would get the size of whatever values we put in here. Now let's see how we can use this size of operator to get the size of our data types. So when we use size of for our data types, it's going to return the amount of memory that is allocated to this data type. For example, if you recall, when we are talking about data types such as int and char and then floats, you could recall that we mentioned that int usually takes about 4 bytes in most 64-bit operating system. To check if this is true with our system, we could use the size of operator to check if the int is going to take about 4 bytes. The char takes about 1 byte. And so the size of operator is going to help us check if these are correct. Now let's see how we can do that here. So here I'm going to use the printf function. And in between the quotes, we are going to look for the size of, and then just this is the syntax, so this is what we are always going to use. We could say size of, and in between write char here, which means character. It's a keyword, so C understands this, you know. But if we run this code like this, we will encounter some errors because this is not the correct syntax. So to use the size of operator, we are going to specify with this sign here, which is a format specifier. And then we want to add a new line and then write size of in between char. So this is the specifier to get the size of operand. You could use LU, %LU, or %ZU. So let's go ahead and check if it would return the size of character for us. Okay, we forgot our semicolon, and now you can see it's returned 1 to us here, which means the size of the character is 1. Now, if we change this to integer and run it, you're going to see what it would return, 4. So the size of an integer is 4. Now, if we change this to floats and run it, you also see 4. So about 4. Now, we could also do something like bytes. Okay, so we could now run this and it says 4 bytes. So this is how we use the size of operator to get our data types. You could go ahead and copy this and print out all the data types in C, at least the major ones. You could come here and then print out, let's say, void. Okay, so let's see what we get. And void has 1 byte and float has 4 bytes. So that's how to use the size of operator to get data types. So easy. Now, let's get into our first problem for the day. For your first coding challenge, I want you to print out this exactly the way it is on the screen. You are going to print out 1, 2, 3, 4. These 4 lines that say size of double quotes int is 4 bytes. Next up, size of char is 1 byte. Size of float is 4 bytes. Size of double is 8 bytes. So go ahead and you are tasked with something here to use all the concepts we've learned so far. Go ahead and try this out. Challenge yourself without looking at the solution that I'll be giving in the next video. Just try to do it. And if you tried your best but couldn't get it, then come back and watch the solution just now. But first off, right. Okay, so how are we going to solve this problem? First off, I'm going to look at this question like this. Use all the concepts we've learned so far. So the first thing I want to ask myself is, what are all the concepts we've learned so far? We've learned about printing numbers where we use either the printf or the puts function. And then we've also seen comments in C. We've also talked about data type, escape sequence, variables, and then size of operators so far. We've talked extensively on these topics, and the tag says we should use all the concepts we've learned so far. So, how do we do this? Well, let's go back to our code and see how to solve this problem. So, the first thing we want to do is to include StdioH. And next up, we want to write out a description. So remember one of the concepts we learned. So comment out your code. So let's use that concept here to write a description for our code. It's going to be a multi-line description, and I would write the main. It's the entry points of this program. I'm also going to write what this program should do. It would print out the size of the data types. So that's what the program will do. And then I will drop my return statement, return, and our return is going to be 0. Now after this, I can now start writing my codes. First off, int main, which is our entry point, and I'm going to come here now and put our curly braces. Now, what other concept have we talked about today? We talked about variables. So instead of just trying to print out the size of data types, why not I store them in variables? So let's go ahead and do that now. For our first data type, the character data type, I'm going to store it in a variable called A. Our next data type, which is an integer, I'm going to store it in a variable called B. Our next data type is a float, and I'm going to store it in a variable called C. And then double, I'm going to store it in a variable called D. These are 4 basic major data types in C, and I've stored all of them in variables. What other concept have we learned so far? We've talked about displaying things to the screen, printing out message, either using puts or printf. In this case, I'm going to use printf function, and remember we did talk about the specifier to be able to print out size of operators. And so I'm going to use ZU. And then what exactly am I to print out from our question? You see, we are supposed to print out size of int is 4 bytes. So the way it is here, which means I would come here now, and in here I'm going to write size of. Now I don't know what is int, so how do I solve this problem? Is size of int is unknown number of bytes, because I'm going to use my size of operator to get the number of bytes which size of int is. After that, I'm going to come here and put a comma, and in here I'm going to write the size of and char. Okay, So when we look at our question, okay, the question says the first is int, then the second is char. So I'm going to align my code like that. Char, the first is int. So int, then here, going to call this int and change this to char. All right, I'm going to now print out all these multiple statements. 2, 3, and 4. But to be able to print out these in new lines, I'm going to use the new line character, which is also an escape sequence in C. To get the new line character, we'll use the /n for all of them. And yes, so this is going to print out the size of different operators for me. So I could say float here. All right, but if I print this out now, I would be missing something. If we look at the output we're supposed to get, we have these quotes in between each of the data types: int, char, float, and double. So how do I solve this problem? I'm going to come here now, and you remember how put the quotes in between all of them, and now if I just do this, I would encounter an error. For example, let me try to run this code and let's see what we get. It doesn't work. It shows a red line, and if you remember, that is because this quotation here is a special character in. Now this won't work because if you remember, these quotes here, anything in between these quotes is what will be printed out. The quote itself is taken as a special character in C. So how do we go ahead to fix this? Remember when we talked about the escape sequence, we are going to be using just that now. The escape sequence to print out characters with double quotes in between them. So let's go ahead and print out those characters. And now let's run our code and see if we're doing the correct thing. Okay, we'll have to add a return value, and our program will return 0. Now let's run this and see. Okay, our program has finished compiling, and we have an error here. 4 bytes, 4 bytes, 4 bytes, 4 bytes, which is not supposed to be so. So how do we fix this? Oh, so we forgot to put char, floats, and double. And now when we run our code again, we can see all of this. But we have a big problem on our hands. We did create these variables, but we are not using them. So in here, rather than put int, we are going to say A. In here, rather than put char, we are going to say B. In here, rather than put float, we are going to say C. And in here, rather than put double, we are going to say D. Now, A represents int because A is a variable and its type is integer. Char here is being represented by B because B is a variable and its type is character. The same thing with all of this. So when we run our code again, let's see what happens. And yes, our process returned with 0. And we've got everything we needed for our first task. I hope this challenge helps you to understand better all the concepts we've talked about. If not so, rewatch the videos, and where you're not clear, you could ask me questions in the comment section. I'll be talking about more things in the next video, still on the basics of C programming. I hope you did enjoy this one. If you did enjoy it, please leave a comment telling me you enjoyed the video and tell me what's next you want me to talk about while I prepare the second part of this C tutorial for absolute beginners.